It was my birthday. I sat alone in the living room, light snow drifting past the window, holding a diagnosis report fresh from the hospital. The doctor said the old injury in my lower back had flared up again. I needed surgery soon or I could lose the ability to walk, maybe even end up bedridden. The surgery and rehab will run you a bit over 30 grand, he said gently, taking off his glasses. His tone was calm but the warning was clear. I nodded and gave a polite smile though my chest tightened. I checked my bank account. I had just over 10,000 in checking, and my CD account wouldn't mature for another 3 months. Pulling it early would cost a chunk of interest. After hesitating for a while, I called my oldest son, David. Surgery. David sounded annoyed, like I had interrupted something. Didn't you always get by with physical therapy when your back acted up? At your age, is it really worth it? I held the phone tightly and kept my voice even. The doctor said it's different this time. The disc is pressing on a nerve. If I don't get surgery, I might not be able to walk again. There was a pause, then he gave a short laugh. Mom, are you sure they're not scaring you into it? Hospitals love wringing money out of old folks. Look, things are tight here, we just moved into a new place. I really don't have money to throw into a bottomless pit. I'm not asking you to give me anything. I just wanted to borrow 10 grand. I'll pay you back when the CD matures. Mom, that's just a waste of money. It's not that I don't care, it's that I'm being logical. You really need to think about whether it's worth it. Didn't you say you have savings? If it's that urgent, use that. But don't always come to us the moment something goes wrong. And with that he hung up. I sat in the kitchen on an old wooden chair, the phone slipping from my fingers and landing on the table with a soft thud. It buzzed once, then went silent. In that moment I felt like one of those rusty old lamps in the boiler room, still flickering but barely swaying in the draft, ready to go dark at any second. A few days later I stumbled upon a photo David and Melissa had posted online. They were standing on a beach in Hawaii, dressed in resort clothes, beaming under the sun. Melissa had captioned it, "Family unwind time. Every penny well spent." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then slowly shut off my phone. I didn't yell. I didn't confront them. Instead I got up, walked into the bedroom and reached for a deep brown wooden box tucked high on the closet shelf. That box wasn't for jewelry or keepsakes. I'd had it since the late shifts at Harbor Machinery more than 20 years ago. It held something else, something I had saved all these years as my own personal last resort. I sat down at the dining table, opened it and knew it was time to act. My name is Grace Whitman. I worked 38 years on the line at one of Pittsburgh's oldest machine plants. I retired just last year. My husband passed when our kids were still young. Since then I played both mom and dad, stretching every paycheck and every overtime hour to raise my 2 boys. David, my eldest, had always been the golden child. Straight A student, responsible, polite. He'd come home from school, finish his homework, then pitch in with chores. In high school he ranked at the top of his class and earned a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania. After graduation he became a math teacher at one of Pittsburgh's top public schools, and married Melissa, a physics teacher from the same school. He used to say on the phone all the time, "Mom, don't scrimp anymore. I make good money now. If you need something, just get it." My younger son, Eric, never went the academic route. He had a knack for working with his hands. Right after high school he started as an apprentice at an auto repair shop, spending his days and often his nights crawling under cars and learning the trade from the ground up. A few years later he partnered with a couple of buddies from the industry and opened his own independent garage. Business was good. On opening day, with grease still smudged across his fingers, he grabbed my hand and said, "Mom, don't worry. I'll be able to take care of you too." Now his business had expanded and he'd bought a place in the city. My old coworkers at the factory loved to tease me. "Grace, both your sons turned out great. You must be so proud." I always smiled and said, "Yeah, they're good boys." And in those moments my heart swelled with quiet warmth. That day, like usual, I went to the community market to pick up some chicken breast and greens. Just as I turned the corner, a loud crash echoed down the street. A small produce delivery truck had flipped over. Potatoes and cabbages scattered across the pavement. An older man in a threadbare trench coat knelt beside the wreckage, panic written all over his face. "Oh Lord, it's all over the place. My wife's waiting at home for her meds. Sir, let me help you." I rushed over, righted the truck and, along with a few passers-by, began gathering the vegetables back into crates. The man clutched my hand, eyes damp. Thank you so much. You've saved me. I waved it off with a smile, but before I could steady myself, a sharp jolt shot through my lower back, like a bolt of electricity. The old injury. The one I'd gotten more than 30 years ago, back when I'd pulled something lifting engine parts on the factory floor. I leaned against the wall and slowly slid down. People nearby hurried to call an ambulance. Lying on the ER gurney, struggling to catch my breath, I pulled out my phone and called David. David, I'm in the hospital. I hurt my back helping a man with a truck. The doctor says I might need surgery. In the background, I could hear the noisy chatter of kids. Sounded like a schoolyard. David's voice was rushed and dismissive. Mom, I'm with my students. We've got some activity going on. Let the doctors take a look first, I'll call you later. Then he hung up. The results came in as expected. Acute disc herniation, nerves already compressed. The doctor urged immediate surgery. The procedure plus rehab will cost around $35,000, he said, tone serious. If you delay, your ability to walk may be permanently affected. I clutched the payment slip, my palm gone cold. I had about 15 grand in my checking account. The rest was tied up in a 3-year CD that wasn't due for a few more months. Pulling it now would come with a heavy penalty. I hesitated for a long time. Then reluctantly I called David again. This time it rang several times before he finally answered, sounding irritated. Mom, I'm prepping for class. Make it quick. I lowered my voice. David, the surgery's going to cost $30,000. I don't have enough. Can you loan me 10? I'll pay you back when my CD matures. He paused for a few seconds, then replied in a hushed tone. Mom, it's not that I don't want to help, but you know how tight things are right now. I've got classroom supplies to pay for, and the kids' summer camp is costing a fortune. I really don't have extra cash. Are you sure the hospital isn't scamming you? There are a lot of frauds out there these days. You need to be careful. David, why would I lie to you? This is straight from the doctor. I tried to keep my voice calm, steady, but there was a thin, unmistakable urgency laced in it. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he let out a vague sigh and said, maybe you should talk to Eric. He's running a business. His finances are probably more flexible than mine. I really can't help right now. I've got to go. The line went dead before I could say another word. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, watching the call-ended notification fade. Then I took a deep breath and tapped on Eric's number. It rang 3 times before he picked up. I could hear car horns and the bustle of the street in the background. His voice came through quick and distracted. Mom, I'm in the middle of a business meeting. What's going on? I tried to keep my voice calm. Eric, something happened. My old back injury flared up. The doctor says I need surgery soon. I'm short on funds. Could you loan me $10,000? There was a pause, 2 seconds, maybe 3, before he responded. I can't, he said bluntly. Honestly, the shop's been struggling lately. Loans, rent, it's been suffocating. And didn't you get hurt helping someone out? Shouldn't he be the one paying for it? I really don't have that kind of money right now. Maybe you could ask one of the other relatives. My voice dropped, my throat tight and raw. Eric, please. Just this once. Think about everything I did to get you through school, to help you open that shop. He let out a tired sigh. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but not kinder. Mom, I've got my own problems. I've gotta go, we'll talk later, okay? The call ended. I kept the phone to my ear for several more seconds, motionless. Only when the busy tone returned did I gently lower it onto the blanket. In that moment, the world felt completely still. I leaned back against the hospital bed, and memories came rushing in, years of night shifts on the factory floor, the clatter of machinery echoing through my bones, the patched-up clothes I wore while cooking dinner for the boys, the freezing winter nights when I bundled them in quilts and ran to the ER with a fevered child in my arms. I thought I'd made it through the hard part of life. That at the very least in this last stretch, I wouldn't have to lie awake wondering how to pay for surgery. I was wrong. I wasn't one of those elderly living alone cases you see on the news. I had 2 sons. I had a home. I had a pension. I had what they call a family. And yet, in that sterile hospital room, I realized the hardest thing isn't being alone. It's having a family, and still feeling like a castaway on some remote island. That night I barely slept. Sometime after midnight, the woman in the next bed got up to use the bathroom. Her daughter helped her gently, whispering, "Take your time, Mom." They stepped out together and the room went quiet again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open. The next morning, to my surprise, David showed up. He brought a cup of coffee, wearing his jacket, looking tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from worry, but the kind that comes from obligation. "Mom, are you sure this hospital's legit?" His first words weren't, "How are you feeling?" or, "Are you in pain?" They were skepticism wrapped in concern. You know how the healthcare system is these days. They'll scare you half to death just to get you on the operating table. "Maybe I should take you somewhere else for a second opinion." I forced myself to sit up despite the pain shooting down my spine. "This is the hospital I've always gone to." The doctor explained everything clearly. "They're not scaring me. I need the surgery, and I need the money for it." David frowned. "Mom, don't get all emotional. Conservative treatment can work too. I had a coworker who got better just taking meds, didn't spend a cent on surgery." My heart sank. I could see right through him. This wasn't about concern. It was about money. About dodging the cost. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked one quiet question. "David, are you really going to let me end up in a bed, needing help just to get to the bathroom?" His tone turned stiff. "Mom, don't say that. I've got my own pressures. You can't only think about this from your perspective." He stayed for less than 20 minutes. Then said he had a staff meeting and left. As for Eric, he never showed up. Since that day, he's only sent a few short texts, things like, "How are you feeling today?" But nothing more. No visit. No call back. Just silence. I tried to explain my situation to them, told them about the surgery, the costs, how I was struggling, but their replies were always the same: "Busy right now," or "Just hang in there." Sometimes they didn't even bother to respond. Lying there in my hospital bed, I watched the woman in the next bed as her son peeled an apple for her. His hands moved with practiced ease, his voice soft and kind. The whole scene looked like something straight out of a commercial. Warm, gentle, full of love. And just like that, something sharp and small pierced my chest. I turned my head and pretended to close my eyes, but the sting reached the corners of them anyway. I wasn't jealous that she had a son. I was jealous that her son remembered who she was. That he remembered what she'd done for him. Not just when he needed a signature or a power of attorney, but as a mother. As a person. I thought of that winter when David had an asthma attack. I ran barefoot into the air with him in my arms, so rushed I'd put on 2 different shoes. I thought of the time Eric broke his arm and I borrowed money to take him to urgent care, then worked 3 overnight shifts in a row to make up the difference. I never thought of those moments as sacrifices. I just did what mothers do. But now, one tells me he doesn't have spare money, and the other asks if I'm sure I'm not getting scammed. Every day, lying there staring at the sterile white ceiling, I kept asking myself, "Grace, did you get it wrong? Was it a mistake to put all your hopes into your children?" Those news stories about elderly parents getting forced out of their homes, pressured to sign over property, left alone while sick. I used to think they were far-off tragedies. Now I think I might be next. So I picked up the phone and called Bill Simmons, my old coworker from Harbor Mechanics. We worked side by side for 20 years. "Grace? What's going on?" "I heard you're in the hospital," he said. I told him everything. There was a beat of silence and then he said, "Don't you worry about the money. I'll wire you 30 grand. You helped me so much back when my wife was sick." I never forgot. My throat caught. "Bill, you're living on retirement like me. I can't ask you to." "Shut it," he barked, just like he used to holler across the shop floor. "Send me your bank account number. Your health comes first." The next day the money landed in my account. I scheduled the surgery. Recovery passed quietly. David and Eric sent the occasional text, "How are you feeling today?" Never once did they ask how much the surgery cost or if I needed anything. Neither of them visited. But Bill dropped by every few days with fresh fruit. Said his wife had gotten into baking and insisted I try her latest creation. I started to see things clearly, who counted as family and who was just borrowing the label. 3 weeks after I was discharged, it was my 65th birthday. I wrote invitations. One for David and his family. One for Eric and his. And one for Bill. On the day of the party, David's family showed up late. Melissa shrugged off her coat and chirped, "Happy birthday. We've just been so swamped." The bank's been crazy lately. I didn't even have time to buy a gift. I smiled. That's all right. I'm just glad you're here. Eric and Jenna had arrived earlier. Jenna was in the kitchen simmering a pot of soup. Eric was chopping vegetables, saying, "Mom, we're making this a proper meal tonight. I even learned a new recipe just for the occasion." Dinner felt easy for a while. Melissa complained about her micromanaging boss. David griped that tenure decisions were harder than a presidential race. Eric chatted about new electric tools the shop had just acquired. I picked up a rib with my chopsticks, smiled faintly, but inside I felt thick and heavy, like something unmoving had settled at the bottom of my chest. David was mid-rant about his shrinking bonus this year, when Melissa's phone lit up on the table. My eyes flicked to it. The screen still displayed her lock screen, her in a bathing suit holding their son standing on a sunlit beach. Palm trees, blue sky, ocean waves in the background. I recognized that photo instantly. I'd seen it the day I got home from the hospital, scrolling through social media on the couch. The caption had read, "A well-deserved break in Hawaii." That trip? That was during the exact week I lay in a hospital bed, worrying about whether I'd even be able to afford to walk again. They said they had financial pressures, that there was no extra money. But somehow they managed a vacation in Hawaii. I didn't call them out. Instead, I quietly sipped my soup, letting them perform their little dinner table play, each line perfectly rehearsed, polite, proper, and entirely hollow. I rose from my chair and walked back to my bedroom. My steps were steady, unhurried, almost as if I wanted to give them time to stew in their unease, let the silence thicken like fog. A few minutes later I came back holding a wooden box. It wasn't large, but with each step I took it might as well have been ticking. A silent explosive in the air, ready to detonate. I sat down and placed it right in the center of the table. Jenna's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Grace, what's this?" Eric glanced up and chuckled. "Don't tell me that's the family heirloom?" Melissa put down her phone. David paused mid-sentence. I ran my hand lightly over the lid, my voice calm and deliberate. "This box. I've had it for 20 years. And today, on my birthday, I think it's time to open it." Jenna leaned in, clearly intrigued. "Is it something special?" David grinned. "What are you hiding in there, Mom? Don't tell me you've been secretly stashing away your pension money?" I placed my palm on the top of the box, my voice low but clear, like the beginning of a letter without a return address. "This box has been with me for 2 decades. And today I want to talk to you, not as your mother but as a person." I paused, looking around at the faces that were familiar, yet suddenly felt so far away. "All these years I raised you both alone. From your first words to your college graduations, to your weddings and new homes. I thought the love I gave you would be returned with respect. That you'd honor it, remember it." I looked between David and Eric, letting the silence hang for just a second longer. But it only took one surgery to show me just how wrong I was. David dropped his gaze. Melissa clutched a napkin, compulsively wiping a plate that was already spotless. Eric looked at me, guilt flickering behind his eyes. I turned to Bill, sitting quietly at the end of the table. Steady as ever, like he had been for 40 years on the factory floor. Never loud but never absent. Luckily, I wasn't entirely alone. I had a real friend. Someone who, when things got hard, didn't hesitate to help. Bill stepped up, gave me the money I needed for my surgery without a second thought. "And you too." I lifted my hand off the box and my voice dropped cold, sharp as a winter draft. "You taught me that blood doesn't always come with responsibility." The table went completely silent. You could hear Melissa swallow. After a long beat, David finally spoke. "Mom, you said you'd tell us when you'd figured it out. What exactly are you trying to say? We have jobs, lives, responsibilities too. You act like we were supposed to drop everything." "Oh, busy." I cut him off, my tone rising before I could stop it. "Were you busy when you were lounging on the beaches of Hawaii?" David's face went pale. Melissa's fork slipped from her fingers and clattered into her plate. Eric turned toward him, eyebrows furrowed. "Wait, Hawaii. You told me you couldn't leave because school was packed and you were swamped with grading." David stiffened. "It was vacation. I took paid leave. And that trip was with our own money. Mom, you can't just weaponize the fact that we didn't lend you money." I pulled out my phone, swiped once and turned the screen toward them. The image was a screenshot from Bill's social media feed. Melissa standing on the beach in a swimsuit holding their son. Palm trees swayed behind her, blue sky overhead. You said you had no money. No time. But while I was lying in a hospital bed waiting for surgery, you were sipping coconut water under palm trees taking photos. I locked eyes with David. You're a professor. You talk about ethics and responsibility in class every day. Tell me, how do you live with yourself in front of your students? Melissa's face flushed deep red. Grace, that's unfair. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were under a lot of stress too, the mortgage, the car loan. We didn't have anything left to give. I turned to Eric, my voice even lower than before. And what about you, Eric? You said cash flow was tight. But the week I got discharged, I stopped by your shop. I saw your ledger. 5-figure deposits, one after another, all recorded in black and white. Eric looked down, his ears burning red. His words came out strained, like they were clawing their way up from his throat. Mom, I didn't mean I didn't want to help. I was just scared. If I gave it to you and you couldn't pay it back, I'd be the one losing out. I let out a cold, sharp laugh. So to you, my worth as a mother comes down to whether or not I can repay a $10,000 loan? When you were kids, I skipped meals, worked double shifts, wore patched-up coats so you could have new school clothes. When you were sick, I sat by your beds for nights on end, holding your hand while you got IVs. Now I'm the one in the hospital and all I get are excuses, busy, no money. But somehow you found the time to vacation. And thousands of dollars to stay in oceanfront hotels. I gestured toward Bill, who was sitting quietly off to the side. He's not family. But he didn't hesitate to wire me the full cost of my surgery. He came to the hospital. He brought fruit. He showed up. You too? All I got were occasional texts. How are you feeling today? Like you were checking the weather. Bill scratched the back of his head, awkward. Grace, you don't need to go into all that. No, I do. I stood up suddenly. The chair screeched loudly against the hardwood floor. You say you love me, but you haven't shown a shred of it. Not even the bare minimum. I didn't invite you here today for birthday gifts, or to hear how tough work has been. I asked you here to see this. I opened the box. Inside, 2 neat stacks of cash and an old-style passbook sat quietly, the money like a weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks. Finally exposed, finally released. And beneath the cash, a sheet of slightly yellowed stationery. The handwriting was steady and clear. I, Grace Whitman, hereby declare the following distribution of my estate. Half shall be gifted to Mr. Bill Simmons in gratitude. The remaining half is reserved for my own care and living expenses. No other familial claims shall be recognized. Silence fell over the room. Melissa was the first to snap, voice shrill. Grace, are you seriously giving your house and savings to someone else? I looked at her with the calm of someone who had nothing left to fear. She was like an uninvited extra barging into the wrong scene. I'm repaying a debt. Bill helped me when I had nothing. No questions, no conditions, just help. And you? You showed me exactly how deep my loneliness goes. Eric shot to his feet, eyes rimmed red. Mom, I was wrong. That day you called, I had the money. I was just scared, okay? I was stupid. And when I wanted to make it right, I didn't know how. I couldn't face you. He fumbled through his wallet and pulled out a check. Here, 10,000. Please, take it. I shook my head and gently pushed the check back toward him, a sad smile tugging at my lips. Now you want to fix it? You think this is about money? My voice wasn't loud, but it hit them like a hammer. Clean, direct, inescapable. All my life I saved and scraped so you could have more. I gave you my time, my energy, my health. I stayed late on the line, skipped doctor visits, hoarded every penny, just to build something for you. But when I needed help, you said you were busy, that you didn't have money. You thought I was being conned. You couldn't even give me your trust. David's face turned crimson. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. Mom, how can you be so cruel? We're your sons. I looked up. There was no anger in my voice, just a quiet weariness that had settled deep into my bones. Sons, I said softly. Do you know who sat with me while I was in the hospital for over 2 weeks? Who asked if I was in pain? Your concern never made it past your phones. Meanwhile, Bill, who isn't even family, came every week. He brought sliced fruit. He sat with me. The room fell into silence so thick it was almost physical. David stared at the floor, completely mute. Eric stood frozen as if I'd slapped him in front of a crowd. I gently closed the wooden box and pulled it into my arms. My voice, steady and final, cut through the hush. I'll repay every penny I owe, Bill. As for the house and my savings, the agreement is legally binding. I've signed and notarized everything. There's nothing left for you to contest. I stood up, rested my hand briefly on the back of the chair and turned toward the door. Mom, wait. Where are you going? Eric rushed to my side, panic rising in his voice. I didn't look back. I'm moving into Riverbend Retirement Community with Bill. We've already made arrangements. It's quiet, peaceful. There's a kitchen, a garden, and a few old friends living there too. Best of all, no one treats me like I'm a burden. You won't need to worry about taking care of me anymore. You don't have to answer my calls. You don't even have to remember my birthday. I reached the front door and pulled it open. Warm sunlight spilled across my shoulders, soft and golden. Behind me, I heard Melissa start to cry, choked, muffled sobs. Then David called out, "Mom." His voice cracked with something that finally resembled regret. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. In that moment, for the first time in years, I saw things clearly. Real happiness isn't found in begging for love. It's in knowing that when you fall, someone will reach out, not because they're obligated but because they care. Real family isn't about blood. It's about empathy. That wooden box hadn't just held money and paper. It held the last opportunity one was ever going to give my sons. And that opportunity had passed. I stepped out into the hallway, the wooden floor creaking beneath me. Every step I took felt like I was walking away from a version of myself. One who had spent her whole life believing that raising children guaranteed a safety net in old age. Maybe one day when they have children of their own, they'll understand. They'll understand that when someone grows old, they don't want expensive gifts or empty birthday greetings. They want someone who will walk into the operating room with them without needing to be asked. That moment, they missed it. The day I moved into the retirement home, the weather was perfect. The sun stretched lazily across the garden benches and maple trees, casting everything in a soft, golden calm. Riverbend was peaceful. A small community where every resident was over 60. There were no collection calls, no whispers about being a burden. No one asked when I was going to move back home. I loved the slow rhythm, afternoon tea at 3, the reading nook next to the sunroom, and the way the light fell through the library windows. Most of all, I loved that no one here asked, "Where are your children?" Because everyone here already knew. That question, more than any, can cut the deepest. On my third day, Bill and I sat together in the garden. He was the same as ever, gruff voice, laugh like shingles falling off a rooftop. "You settling in?" he asked, plopping down beside me with a cup of tea. "It's nice here," I said, watching a group of women sunbathe on the lawn. "People read, play violin, plant flowers. No one tells you you're too old to be on your own." I didn't say what I was thinking, but Bill knew anyway. He handed me my cup and asked, "Either of your boys called yet?" I smiled faintly. Sort of. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from David's lawyer. It was laced with sincere concern and thoughtful suggestions, asking me to reconsider my estate decisions and proposing we create a space for family discussion. I sipped my tea as I slipped the letter back into an envelope. Inside, I included a single sticky note. "Thank you for your concern. The agreement has been legally notarized. Any further issues, please contact my attorney." 3 days later, Eric called. "Mom." His voice was thinner than I remembered, hollow around the edges. "I know I messed up. I was wondering if we could go back to how things used to be." I didn't say a word. Just placed the phone on the table and let it ring itself into silence. A few minutes later, a text arrived. "Mom, I just wanted a slice of your apple pie." I stared at those words for a while. My mind drifted, steam curling from the stovetop, cinnamon in the air, his teenage voice asking if the crust was ready yet. But all I wrote back was, "I'm doing very well here. You don't need to worry about me." Life at the retirement community turned out to be more fulfilling than I could have imagined. We had gardening classes, a small theater troupe, knitting workshops, and movie nights every weekend. Bill, ever the instigator, nominated me for activities coordinator on the resident council. I tried to turn it down. Somehow I won by a landslide. At my first tea social, a woman in her 90s stood up slowly with her cane and said, "Thank you, Ms. Grace. You reminded us that getting older doesn't mean losing our choices." I sat in the corner, her words washing over me like sunlight melting frost. I used to say, I don't want to trouble my kids. Now I say, I don't owe anyone anything. 2 weeks passed and then I found another envelope from David in the mail. This one wasn't typed by a lawyer. It was handwritten, tentative. A peace offering. He wrote, Mom, I'd like to bring Ben to visit you. He's been asking about you. Ben, my only grandchild. A quiet, bright boy who had once clung to me more than his parents. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I texted David back. Ben is welcome. But please don't come with him. He replied almost immediately, Why? I wrote, Because he doesn't owe me anything. But you missed your chance to repay what you did owe. That evening I was brewing tea in the sunroom when Bill dragged over 2 chairs. We sat down shoulder to shoulder watching the last of the sun skim the glass. After I told him about the letter he gave a small nod. So, you finally see it? I nodded back. I do. They're not coming to make amends. They're trying to collect a feeling. They want to stop feeling guilty. What are you going to do? I turned the cup slowly in my hands. I'm not angry. And I'm not forgiving them either. I'm just done playing the part. What part? The always available mom. The mom who forgives no matter what. The mom who waits by the door forever saying, You can always come home. David never replied to that last text. And I didn't look back. But Ben came. He wore a khaki baseball cap and a backpack covered in planets. As soon as he walked in, he grinned at me and asked, Grandma, do you have any ice cream? I laughed, ruffled his hair. Of course. Chocolate. That afternoon we did puzzles, drew pictures and sat on a bench by the garden telling stories. I told him about catching fireflies in the cornfields with my grandmother. He listened with wide eyes, never once asking to leave, even when the sun started dipping behind the trees. I told him to take his drawing home with him. He looked up and asked, Can I come back and visit you again? I smiled. You can come anytime you want. A few weeks after Ben's visit, word started to trickle in about David. His contract at the school had been terminated. He was once in line to become assistant principal, but after a heated argument with a group of parents and a nosedive in his reputation, everything unraveled. Some said he fudged parts of his research record. Others said he was simply arrogant, made too many enemies. Whatever the reason, he was no longer the rising star on the tenure track. Melissa didn't fare much better. Her department at the bank went through layoffs and she was listed in the second round. One day I stumbled across a sponsored ad from her on social media. She was selling personal finance courses for women, preaching financial independence, while standing in her kitchen, a whiteboard taped awkwardly to the fridge behind her. I stared at that photo for a long moment, and for the first time in a while I almost laughed. As for Eric, I'd known for a while his auto shop had gone under. He tried pivoting to RV rentals, but with a poor credit score he couldn't secure a loan. Eventually he ended up working for a national repair chain, bounced to a new city and changed his number. What didn't change was his habit. Disappearing when things got hard, resurfacing only when there was something to gain. Each of them, in their own way, tried to reach for me again once life started to fold in on them. I remember it clearly. One night past 10 o'clock I got a call from David. Mom. His voice was brittle. I know it's late but things are rough over here. He paused. Then came the pitch. Could you loan me $2,000? Just to hold us over a bit. For Ben. I listened to him finish and then I asked, Is it really for Ben? Or are you just borrowing his name to soften your own fall? He didn't answer. You know, I said calmly, I have the $2,000. That's not the problem. But I'm done spending money to help you dodge the consequences of your choices. And then I hung up. That winter, I organized a Christmas fundraiser across the community to raise money for seniors with medical needs. Bill helped set up the tents. The ladies from the sunroom baked over 50 apple pies. Others donated handmade cards, bars of soap and knitted scarves. We filled an entire row of tables. The director even invited a local paper to cover it. In their write-up, someone described me as a pine tree in winter, steady even in the wind. I didn't think I deserved that. I wasn't trying to be strong. I was just, finally at peace. That evening I sat out on the balcony under a crisp night sky. Stars stretched wide above me. Bill handed me a mug of hot apple cider with a dash of cinnamon. He asked, Do you still miss them? I thought about it. I miss who I thought they were. He didn't say a word. Just raised his mug gently and tapped it against mine. To the woman who finally let go of the fantasy, he said. I clinked his glass softly. Cheers. In the second half of life, I finally stopped waiting for someone to come back. Because I wasn't standing there anymore.
I'm David. I stood at the gate of the retirement community, the letter still in my hand, returned, unopened, not a crease on the envelope. Even the word Mom, written in my own handwriting on the front, hadn't been touched. It was the third one I'd sent. She hadn't replied to a single one. I told myself I'd made peace with the world no longer revolving around me. But when I held that letter, still sealed, in the same state I'd sent it, it felt like something inside me split just slightly open. She really wasn't coming back. I thought of her birthday, that day we all sat at the table. She held that wooden box like it weighed more than just paper and cash. Her face, composed but unfamiliar, looked nothing like the woman I thought I knew. I assumed she was just old, fragile, feeling nostalgic. Maybe she wanted to reflect on the past a little. But instead, she pulled the curtain back on something none of us ever dared touch: responsibility. That day she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just laid out every word we'd spoken, every choice we'd made, every absence we had justified, and held them up to the light. I remember sitting there, scalp prickling, my face flushed and hot. Melissa sat beside me, bouncing her knee nervously, looking to me for a signal, a script, anything to explain it all. But I had nothing to give her, because what Mom had pulled out of that box wasn't money. It was the bill. The final invoice of a lifetime spent picking up after us, smoothing things over, holding things together, without ever asking what it cost her. I used to imagine she'd break down one day, scream, throw a plate, slam a door. But she didn't. She just said, I'll pay Bill back. The agreement's been signed. From now on, I won't be your burden. And then she turned around and left, never once looking back. That night, I drank too much. Melissa went on and on about how I'd let her be humiliated, how her own mother was just as dramatic. But I didn't argue, because the truth was, I knew it wasn't her. It was me. It wasn't that I didn't love my mother. It's that I took her presence for granted. I remembered the gloves she hand-stitched for me as a kid, the nights she stayed up tending to my fever. Those memories were still there, clear as day. What I'd never considered was that she could grow old, that she could hurt, that she could lose hope. I realized that for the first time the day I saw Melissa's Hawaii photo again. She was smiling wide on the beach, hair windblown, Ben beside her. The timestamp was from the same week Mom was lying in a hospital bed, waiting on money for surgery. That's when it hit me, how much of a coward I'd been. I remembered the second call she made, the faint hope in her voice. How she was trying not to sound desperate, how carefully she chose her words. And what did I say? I said, Are you sure you're not being scammed? Then I hung up and booked plane tickets to Hawaii. I told myself it was overdue vacation time. That Ben needed the ocean. That Melissa and I needed the space. But on that beach, with my camera aimed at Ben splashing in the waves, I got a text from Eric. She's had the surgery. Bill paid for it. I froze. That night, I stood on the hotel balcony and smoked a cigarette. First one in 10 years. Not because I was anxious, but because I was ashamed. Real shame doesn't come from being misunderstood. It comes from being seen clearly, and knowing you failed the test. I went to the retirement community once, not long after, just to catch a glimpse. From the edge of the lawn, I saw her with a few other women planting roses. She moved slowly, carefully, sun hat tilted over her brow. Her face looked peaceful, steady. Bill stood nearby with a watering can, the two of them moving in quiet rhythm like a team long established. I didn't go closer, but I know she saw me. She didn't wave, didn't turn her head. She just slipped off her gloves and went on digging. And in that moment, I understood. She wasn't angry anymore. She just didn't need me anymore. Since then, life's been pretty rough. The school brought in new leadership. The new department head had no patience for what he called my old school standards. My promotion fell through. My evaluation file got bounced back 3 times. After the layoffs at the bank, Melissa fell into a slump even worse than mine. She tried offering online finance classes, but barely anyone signed up. Eventually, we had to pull Ben out of piano lessons. And honestly, I couldn't blame anyone. It was just me, living in the aftershock of all the choices I'd made or hadn't made. And then, I started dreaming of Mom. In my sleep, I was small again, sick and scared, clinging to her back as she rushed us through the cold night to the emergency room. One hand holding me, the other gripping a pair of shoes. Her voice, steady and soft. "Don't be afraid, baby. Mama's here." I'd wake up with a soaked pillow and a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. So I wrote her a letter. The first one she didn't open. The second one I made longer. I wrote down everything. The first time I dodged her call with "I'm busy." The time I passed the buck with "That's not my decision." Every moment I'd chosen the easier path instead of the right one. She didn't open that one either. The third letter, I folded it into a copy of my favorite educational psychology book, the one she'd bought me in college, and mailed it. That time, she replied. Not with a letter. With one line. "David, it's not that you didn't have chances. It's that every time, you chose the wrong road." I cried. Cried like a child who finally saw the mess he'd made and couldn't hide behind grown-up excuses anymore. Now, I teach at a non-profit counseling center. Not a fancy job. The pay's nothing special. But for the first time in years, I feel solid. Grounded. Every Friday, I give a public seminar to a group of high schoolers on family, accountability, and what it means to show up. And I tell them, love isn't just a feeling. It's a responsibility. It only matters if you show up in time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make it all up to her. But I do know this. If Mom is sitting in that garden, with her hands in the soil and the sun on her face, maybe, just maybe, she'd feel a little peace knowing I've finally stopped running. And for the first time, I can quietly say, Mom, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know, I really did learn.